Well, if you've ever wondered who's in our dream blunt rotation, stick around. But there's no curiosity, there's no question of who's in Senator Elizabeth Warren's dream blunt rotation. She recently revealed it's The Rock. Warren cited Dwayne The Rock Johnson as a key member of her rotation. Pod Save America host John Favreau asked Warren to choose 4 people out of a list to be in said rotation. For those not in the know, a dream blunt rotation is a group of people you'd hypothetically like to smoke weed with because they'd be a good time. Favreau gave President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Senator Bernie Sanders, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Senator Ed Markey as options before mentioning The Rock, to which Warren exclaimed, "Oh, The Rock, I'm stopping there."
It's one of the most consequential news segments we've ever produced. Meanwhile, a new FDA report highlights its review process into marijuana that led the agency to recommend rescheduling the drug. Now, the process involved looking at hundreds of posts on social media to analyze how consumers described weed's therapeutic impact, which perhaps sounds nefarious, but I think is not as out there.
You're looking at publicly available information to see if people are
having a bad trip.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, at a certain point with the social media stuff, when it's public as opposed to getting into your DMs or using information to target you with ads or direct you on one way or another or shadow ban you, just, if you say something out loud, whether or not you want to use that publicly available information to make judgment about the efficacy of medical intervention or something like that, it's hard for me to get as up in arms about something like that.
Yeah, and I support wildly rescheduling marijuana, legalizing marijuana. This is a substance that many people use with very little ill effect. I mean, again, I'm a libertarian, so I think it should be up to you to put whatever you want in your body. It does have therapeutic benefit for veterans. It can be used as a pain treatment. We're so concerned about opioid addiction and all of those problems. This is a great, much safer alternative. There's really no. Is it absolutely perfectly safe for everyone? No. Some people have psychological problems when they use it, but alcohol is legal. Tobacco is still legal in many cases. These are things that, again, I think they should be legal. I'm not calling for that status to change, but that are clearly vastly more harmful than a little bit of weed. So I am in wild support of legalization. Actually, it's something Biden could probably do right now that would make him more popular. Even Republicans think, at least a lot of Republicans think, at the very least it should be decided on the state levels. If states want to experiment with different marijuana policies, that's fine by me. Some want to do medical marijuana, some want to go all the way, great. But because it's federally scheduled, technically, even when states legalize it, it falls into this gray area where you could still get in trouble or arrested by the federal government, particularly if you're growing it yourself or you're selling it or something like that, which is not a situation we want to be in, where states have said, this is going to be our policy to allow people to experiment with more freedom. Federal government's going to swoop in and say, no, we still consider this just as dangerous as heroin. I mean, it's ludicrous, but that's how the federal government approach to drugs works.
Yeah, this was a big issue in Joe Biden's campaign, and this is one of those promises made, no promises kept moments. It does seem like despite decriminalization and descheduling being such popular issues in the country with bipartisan support, Joe Biden seems to have some kind of personal issue with this in particular, so much so that, remember, early in his campaign, there was a bit of controversy when 5 staffers were fired and I think a bunch more were implicated because they admitted to legally using marijuana on their employment forms, thinking that they were working for a president who said he was committed to deschedule these drugs and decriminalize these drugs, and they were kind of hoisted by their own petard there. The Daily Beast reported at the time that the policy even affected staffers whose marijuana use was exclusive to one of the 14 states in the District of Columbia where cannabis is legal. Understandably, many Biden staffers live and work in Washington, D.C., where cannabis is legal, and yet they were still fired from their jobs by the Biden administration in contravention of the policies that he said he was going to run on.
That's why it kind of annoys me when politicians even joke about their dream blunt rotation. And, Elizabeth Warren, I disagree with her on a lot of things. She does support full decriminalization of marijuana. Good for her. Glad she does. Wish she would do more to, manifest that policy into existence. But I guess if she jokes about it for that reason, it's fine. But she included, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in her dream blunt rotation. Are they going to have her arrested?
Well, in all fairness, so it was Favreau who gave her options for who was going to be could be in her rotation, and the options included Biden, Kamala, Bernie Sanders, Janet Yellen, and Ed Markey. Like, given those as options, I too would probably have said The Rock.
Why did Janet Yellen get thrown in there? What's
who knows?
A little bit of
I guess because
a party animal that we're missing out on.
Elizabeth Warren's consumer finance. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And I can imagine very clearly that she would want to have a social event of any kind with Bernie Sanders after the kinds of accusations that she levied against him at the end of the 2020 campaign, accusing him of deep-seated sexism and a belief that a woman can never be president in the United States of America. Don't know that you can put that back into the bag and have a...
Maybe they need a little bit of weed and they can work it out,
Maybe that is the case. But I completely agree with you.
It's a good opportunity, good way to apologize for something is under the influence of just a little bit of weed. I don't know. I'm just, what I hear.
I really wouldn't know. But I think that, these things are frustrating. These kind of joking questions are frustrating because this should be, it's a podcast, whatever, but it is also people who are holding themselves out as doing journalism, and journalism would be pressing Elizabeth Warren on why she has not been critical of the Biden administration for not following through on the campaign promises in this regard. Biden was elected in the middle of a multi-million person protest movement, the largest in American history, around decriminalization and issues of over-policing. And now, these years later, Biden gets elected, the movement goes away, and everyone just sits around joking about their dream blunt rotation when millions of Americans are sitting in prison for doing exactly that, smoking weed.
It just seems like such an easy winning issue because there is some opposition to doing it, but it's not substantial. Again, it's a mixed Republican issue. There are a lot of Republicans who support at least like a states' rights approach to it. You could easily change the federal approach without. And that would be a win. That would make young people really happy. It would make progressives happy. It would make a lot of Republicans happy too. Frankly, this is something that veterans groups are in support of this. Frankly, police groups. I've talked to police groups that are in support of this because they think having to waste time busting people for marijuana is a waste of their resources.
To your point, the ACLU did a report that showed that there were 8.2 million marijuana arrests between 2001 and 2010. 88% were for simply having marijuana, not sales, not some drug kingpin, just having marijuana. I actually had the experience yesterday. I was walking back home from the grocery store, and I passed this guy who was going into his apartment, and he dropped a blunt on the ground. And I had this moment of hesitation where, in my head, I was like, oh, this is illegal. Like, I just, I panicked. And it was like, normally I would say, hey, you dropped something, if it were your keys or a piece of paper or whatever. But I had this moment like, oh, am I an accomplice? I froze. It's like, do I tell this guy?
Fully legal.
Am I like calling him out? Like, it was like a block from a weed shop. Clearly, it's like we were on the corner standing next to a weed shop. But I froze for like a millisecond, and he went into the door, and then I felt really bad. And on my way back from the grocery store, I saw that the blunt was no longer there on the sidewalk. So I don't know if he came back and realized, or someone else just had Christmas come early this year.
I think my dream blunt rotation would have to involve my former co-host on the show, Ryan Grimm, who is, I think, who is, like me, quite enthusiastic about legalization and then some.
That's not surprising to hear about a fish head like Ryan. All right, stick around. We have more Rising for you up next.